It was deep into the night, just past midnight, when I eased my rental car up the winding driveway of my home in Riverwood Heights, the gravel shifting under the tires with that familiar, almost comforting crunch that usually signaled the end of a long journey. But this time it carried an undercurrent of unease, because there, gleaming under the moonlight like an unwelcome intruder, floral perfume that assaulted my senses the moment I turned the key and stepped inside, a scent so cloying and distinctive that it immediately conjured images of tense neighborhood meetings and forced politeness. And in that instant, the fog of jet lag from my prematurely ended business trip across the ocean lifted just enough for the truth to hit me like a cold wave. I realized that Sylvia Hargrove, our domineering HOA chairperson, had gone far beyond her usual barrage of citations and power plays. She had invaded my space, turned my inherited sanctuary into her personal domain. Comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever dealt with a neighborhood overseer who thought they could rewrite the rules of decency itself, because this tale, my friends, resilience, and ultimately, a hard-won justice that still echoes in my thoughts late at night. Let me take you back to the beginning, introduce myself properly. I'm Ethan, closing in on 50, known as Riverwood Heights, a place where the lawns are impeccably trimmed, almost as if measured by laser, and neighbors exchange smiles that often hide undercurrents of judgment, a gift from my captured the minutiae of daily life, a habit that, little did I know, would later serve as my most potent ally in the storm to come. This inheritance came at a time when my world had been upended by a divorce that ravaged my finances like a relentless hurricane, leaving me stripped bare but somehow standing, and receiving this property, valued at close to $1 million and fully paid off, and faint vanilla from her favorite candles, wrapping around me like a gentle hug from the past, the antique floors creaking softly under my weight, each step a reminder that I had found a refuge. And every morning thereafter, the subtle hum of the old heating system would greet me, a soothing rhythm that whispered of security in a life that had felt anything but secure for far too long. Yet, as with any paradise, there lurked a shadow, one that manifested in the form of Sylvia Hargrove, a woman in her mid-50s who had held the reins as HOA chairperson for almost 10 years. Click of her heels against the stone path, me surrounded by stacks of unpacked boxes, sweat on my brow from the move. And there she stood, notepad gripped like a weapon of bureaucratic warfare. Storms violated the community's strict slate gray color mandate, a relic of endurance that apparently held no sway against the ironclad aesthetic standards she enforced with relish, informing me of a looming $200 fine if not rectified within 2 weeks. And when I protested, highlighting its historical presence predating even her tenure, her response was delivered with a smug certainty. Legacy yields to uniformity or faces consequences, her eyes sparkling with the quiet satisfaction of someone who thrived on such small dominions. This initial skirmish was just the prelude to a symphony of grievances, the following weeks unfolding with relentless precision, like the citation for my recycling bins remaining visible after sunset, disregarding my demanding schedule as a digital forensics consultant that often extended into the wee hours, her vehicle's low rumble becoming a harbinger of dread as yet another notice slid beneath my door in the dead of. And by the 3rd month, she escalated to absurd heights, threatening penalties for what she deemed excessive commercial endeavors simply because occasional deliveries for my home-based tech security. Every action was dissected like evidence in a high-stakes trial, a pattern so blatant it bordered on parody, yet carried the sting of targeted harassment. She's protective of her domain. Carefully curated hierarchy, especially those who acquired what she coveted, and when I mentioned my impending month-long trip to Asia for professional commitments, confiding only in Margaret and allow me to monitor it, her eyes scanning my interiors with a predatory gleam, as if already envisioning her temporary reign, and my firm refusal drawing a scowl that could curdle milk. Very well. Shattered the anticipation, the house aglow like a beacon, music drifting out, compelling me to slip around to the back entrance, retrieving the spare key from its hiding spot beneath a loose garden stone, a secret from childhood sojourns with Eleanor, who always insisted that rear doors were for true belonging, fronts for mere appearances, and crossing the threshold, The assault was visceral, stained with residues from my carefully curated wine collection downstairs. Navigating my own home like a shadow operative, my phone's camera capturing every anomaly as per instincts honed from years. Assisting litigators with electronic evidence, documenting foreign attire draped over furniture, alien bath products in my suite, prescription bottles bearing S. Hardrove's name on the counter. The shower's roar from above accompanied by tuneless singing. A desecration so profound it churned my stomach with a mix of violation and fury, ascending the staircase, each familiar creak amplifying. The surrealness, steam escaping the ajar door, a silhouette visible through the frosted pane, and I announced myself, Sylvia, the echo bouncing off the tiles, the melody ceasing instantly. A recent spate of intrusions in the area necessitated my protective measures, a service to the community, but gesturing to the emptied bottle of rare Cabernet on the nightstand, a vintage reserved for life's milestones, I retorted, by depleting my cellars and occupying my bedchambers, her flush deepening yet resolve hardening like a gambler doubling stakes. I possess emergency jurisdiction. I observed while recording, but document scrutiny is my profession. Then, the flush from the guest bath propelled the evening into outright lunacy. Emerging was Frank Donnelly in full uniform. Chilling clarity, this transcended simple trespass. It was a coordinated scheme bolstered by law enforcement complicity. Frank, you're unlawfully present in my abode, off-duty but armed alongside someone who's illicitly resided here during my absence. His assurance dissolving like mist, she assured me of your approval for oversight. And did that extend to your involvement? The silence taught. This is all documented, and I suspect your superiors maintain stringent guidelines against such entanglements, particularly when fraud lurks. Sylvia's complexion paling to ashen, you can't substantiate any illegality, but actually, I can, and how? Morning light filtered in as I attempted rest in my reclaimed bed, though slumber was fleeting, every house sound evoking fears of replicated keys, prompting immediate calls to rekey the locks, followed by a meticulous probe into the incursion's extent, treating the premises like a forensic site, the garage revealing displaced. She shared. Sylvia disseminated stories of your temporary rental to her, attributing it to financial strains post-divorce, the breach now encompassing reputational sabotage, including lavish. And by noon, her counterstrike materialized, an edict affixed to my door convening an abrupt board session that evening. Minimal forewarning, yet technically valid, allegations of unrest. Her confederates, her realty patrons, relative Lorraine a compliant echo, solely veteran Ethel Langford appearing autonomous, the tale warped, casting me as the erratic aggressor invading his own domain, supported by Frank's biased narrative reframing intrusion as altruism. Granted scant time to refute, I solicited records validating her intrusion powers, her dodges evasive, internal affairs, augmented by recurring oversight charges, Ethel the solitary objector, and in the lot's frosty embrace, her murmur, she's perpetrated this before, expelling prior challengers, affirming the scope. Surpassed my ordeal, a systemic predation. The ensuing Monday propelled me to Rachel Keller's legal sanctuary, evidence-laden box in hand, determination forged in fire, her practice honed on property. Recording accomplices with intimate familiarity, zoning complaints mirroring detailed awareness, digital defamations assailing my repute, even interrogating Alex at his institution. Patrol units patrolling with unnatural frequency, a psychological barrage. Nevertheless, my countermeasures shown, retrieving spectral data from backups and temp files, videos chronicling her. Connecting to her phantom firm, a scheme for leveraging absences as display venues, drafts for discounted acquisitions, magnitude astounding, vast sums embezzled across districts. The affront evolved. From individual grievance to calculated assault, my circumstances ideal prey. Recently single, unfamiliar, traveling. Yet her oversight, dismissing my aptitude for digital dissections. Her composure fracturing beneath probes, each innocent question about vendor bids or receipt trails landing like a perfectly aimed dart, her voice rising in pitch, her hands fluttering over papers. Because when you start asking for proof and the proof keeps disappearing, Even the most obedient start to wonder who's really running the show. Her reprisal came faster than I expected. Vicious and personal, the kind of swing that tells you you've hit a nerve you didn't even know was exposed. One morning I woke to find a petition for a restraining order taped to my front door like some medieval decree. Sylvia claiming I'd been stalking her, driving past her condo at odd hours, intimidating her clients, making veiled threats, the whole performance written in breathless grudges, and I walked in with Rachel Keller at my side, a banker's box of evidence balanced on my hip like a loaded weapon, while Sylvia arrived with a discount attorney who looked like he'd been aggressive at board meetings, how she felt unsafe in her own community, how I'd been circling her home like some predator, and for a moment, a few people in the gallery actually nodded, because she'd always been good at playing the victim when the mask slipped. Then Rachel stood up, calm as winter steel, and asked permission to present a timeline, and the screen behind the bench lit up with security footage time-stamped to the exact minute Sylvia claimed I was lurking outside her condo. Only the footage showed me in my own kitchen, hosting Alex's study group, passing out pizza, and pointed out that the officer had been present in my home, off-duty, in uniform, at Sylvia's invitation, without a single mention of that detail in his report. Judge Vargas denied the restraining system actually works, and when it does, it's beautiful. She didn't stop there, of course. Desperation makes people creative in the worst ways. Anonymous complaints started hitting my business inbox. Alex, a call to his school alleging neglect, claiming I was leaving a minor home alone for weeks at a time while I jetted off to Europe. The counselor knew us well enough to smell the setup from a mile away, but still, a social worker showed up at our door one rainy Wednesday, clipboard in hand, concern etched into every line of her face. I invited her in, poured coffee, let her interview Alex. While he rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd stick, and by the end of the hour she was complimenting our home, praising Alex's grades and maturity, closing the case with a report that basically. The remaining loyalists murmured sympathy, but the rest of us just exchanged looks, because nobody's that unlucky. I spent the next 48 hours in a dark room with a data recovery specialist. Gone. We pulled back 87% of the lost data, including browser history from the morning of the supposed crash, showing searches for how to wipe a hard drive beyond recovery, and downloads of military-grade erasure software, plus a spreadsheet titled Homeowners Most Likely to Pay Without Asking Questions, color-coded like a psychopath's mood board. While we were piecing together her digital confession, Sylvia went full scorched earth, proposing a special assessment of $15,000 per household to cover unexpected legal defense costs caused by, you guessed it, my vindictive lawsuit. She framed it as wealthy newcomer bullying the little people, told the board that if we didn't circle the wagons, property values would plummet, and half the retirees would lose their homes. It was a masterclass in manipulation, except this time the room wasn't full of intimidated widows and overworked parents. Word had spread. 43 homeowners showed up to that meeting, standing room only, the air thick with coffee and barely contained fury, Margaret passing out homemade lemon bars like we were at a bake sale instead of a revolution. Ethel Langford, God bless her 82-year-old spine, stood up with a voice that could have commanded armies and moved to remove Sylvia Hargrove from the board for gross financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The vote was 4-1, her cousin Lorraine the only holdout, and 10 minutes later Lorraine was gone too, voted out for failure to exercise basic oversight, which is polite legalese for being a useless enabler. Sylvia was still gathering her designer purse, face blotchy with rage and humiliation, when the doors at the back of the community center swung open and FBI Special Agent Carla Ramirez walked in, flanked by 2 agents who looked like they'd been carved from granite. The room went so quiet you could hear the autumn wind rattling. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound I'll remember for the rest of my life. Cold metal on entitlement. And as they let her out, Sylvia screamed over her shoulder, "This is his fault. He destroyed everything." 43 people watched in silence, and not one of them looked away. Alex, doing homework in the back row, glanced up from his notebook and deadpanned, "Well, streetlights, trading phone numbers, planning a potluck that actually sounded fun for the first time in years, because something had broken open Something better than anger, solidarity. The kind that's forged in shared outrage and tastes like hope. 3 weeks later, the story had outgrown our little gated bubble and become front-page news across the county, the city council chamber. Voice trembling with rehearsed vulnerability as she talked about her 8 years of selfless service, how she'd protected property values and maintained standards, painting herself as the martyr of a vendetta launched by a wealthy newcomer who couldn't handle reasonable rules. For a minute it almost worked, heads nodding, murmurs of sympathy, because she'd spent a decade perfecting that act. But then she crossed the line, looked straight at the cameras and declared, "I have never, ever done anything unethical or illegal." And that was the moment I knew we had her. I asked for permission to rebut, walked to the front with my laptop like I was carrying a live grenade, and the screen behind me lit up with the first clip, security footage of Sylvia hosting a catered dinner for 8 in my dining room, laughing as she gave tours to prospective buyers, bragging about managing this exquisite property, followed by the shot of her photographing my office files, then the one where she coached Frank on how to handle homeowners who ask too many questions. The room went from sympathetic to stone-cold silent, then to gasps, then to the kind of collective anger that raises the temperature by 10 degrees. I advanced to the spreadsheets. $89,000 in fake invoices, phantom vendors, repairs that never happened. Every arrow pointing straight to Whitfield Prestige Properties LLC, her personal piggy bank. Agent Carla Ramirez stood up unprompted and addressed the crowd, listing the federal charges. The 6 communities, the dozens of victims, and you could have heard a pin drop on carpet. Councilman David Ellis, who'd been quiet until then, took the mic and laid out the new ordinance. Quarterly independent audits, mandatory conflict of interest disclosures, criminal background checks for anyone handling HOA funds, and when the vote came it was unanimous, 7-0. The Homeowner Protection and Transparency Act passed into law before the echo of Sylvia's lies had even faded from the rafters. Old Mrs. Harlan, who'd paid $800 for landscaping that never happened, stood up in the back row, voice shaking but clear, and said, "I just want to thank Ethan Reed for fighting when the rest of us were too scared." And the applause that followed lasted a full 3 minutes, people on their feet, some crying, because sometimes justice isn't quiet, sometimes it roars. 6 months later the gavel fell for Rayal. Sylvia took a plea to avoid a trial that would have paraded every victim in front of a jury, 18 months in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, $127,000 in restitution, her real estate license revoked permanently, barred from ever serving on an HOA board again in any state. Frank Donnelly got 6 months in county, lost his pension, his badge, his reputation, banned from law. Grand in punitive damages, every penny seeded into the Riverwood Heights Unity Fund, money that now pays for roof repairs for widows, medical bills for families hit by surprise, grocery runs for anyone who falls behind. Because we decided if Sylvia was going to steal from the community was going to turn her theft into something good. I got roped into serving as treasurer for the new board despite every protest I could muster, and let me tell you, our monthly financial reports are so detailed they make accountants blush. Open bidding, public comment, live streamed. Meetings where people actually talk about potholes and holiday lights instead of hiding behind anonymous complaints. Property values went up 8% the first year, not because we painted all the mailboxes the same color, but because buyers started hearing that Riverwood Heights was the neighborhood where the HOA works for the homeowners, not the other way around. My house stopped feeling like a crime scene somewhere along the way. The first big barbecue we threw that fall, 60-plus neighbors on the lawn, kids running through the sprinklers, Alex and his friends spiking volleyballs over a net set up exactly where Sylvia used to park her unauthorized Mercedes. It hit me that the place smelled like grilled steak and Margaret's apple pie again, not violation and perfume. Eleanor's journals turned out to be gold, pages of her neat handwriting documenting every shady feast Sylvia ever tried to slip past her, proof that even from beyond the grave my aunt was still watching out for me. The ripples kept spreading. Ethan's law got picked up by 3 more states inside a year. I found myself testifying in front of legislatures, speaking at homeowner rights conferences, My cybersecurity business tripled because clients liked knowing I could spot a con from a mile away. The documentary When HOAs Go Rogue premiered at the local film festival and won. Workshops teaching people how to read their bylaws, how to spot red flags, how to fight back without losing their minds. The legal defense scholarship we funded helped 12 families recover $32,000 in bogus fees last year alone. 2 years on, our block party is the event people plan their vacations around. This year we had over 100 attendees, including families from other neighborhoods Sylvia targeted, swapping war stories and recipes like old friends. Standing in my backyard watching kids chase fireflies while Alex and his buddies argued over the playlist. I caught the scent of charcoal and fresh-cut grass and realized Eleanor had been right all along. This house was always meant to bring people together, just not in the way any of us expected. Looking back, the nights I didn't sleep, the mornings I wanted to sell the place and run, the fear that I was tearing apart a community instead of saving it, all of it feels worth it now. But it still makes me wonder, was the cost too high? Does real justice always have to hurt this much? And where's the line between holding someone accountable and becoming the kind of crusader who burns bridges along with the bad guys? I'd love to know what you think. Drop your thoughts below. Have you ever had to choose between peace and what's right? Was it worth it? And if you've got your own HOA horror story, share it, because the more we talk, the harder it is for the next Sylvia to hide in plain sight. Documentation beats intimidation every single time, and sometimes the bullies